Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Steps Basic and welcome back to my community show. Beard. Anyway, thank you once again for joining me today. Today is the third installment of our Spooktober community show, and today we are talking about my favorite horror games. Now, small disclaimer before I start this. Now, I'm a fan of horror as a genre. It's like one of my favorites up there. I love it. But there are certain games that are horror games that I don't consider horror games because they don't fit into my ideal definition of horror game. So if you don't see your favorite horror game on this list, it's probably because I don't think of it as a horror game, more of as like an action adventure game, like a lot of the Resident Evil series has become. I haven't played 7 all the way through yet, so I can't really vouch for that one. However, from what I've seen, it looks like it could be a contender for this list. Now, I am an old fart. I have been playing games since I was a wee lad of, really young. I've played games from the original Dragon Warriors to friggin' Burger Time on the Atari. I've mentioned that like 4 times on the show before, but that's not important. What's important right now is horror games. Now, I played games on the NES that were horror games, but they were just like not good. I actually noticed this when I was playing it, or a friend of mine pointed it out while I was playing Friday the 13th, that Jason was purple, and I'm like, what the heck, why is this guy purple? And he pointed it out, it was like the NES Classic version. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that game, I played that game. That was not on this list because I never really made it very far in that game. I died a lot. But anyway, enough with me ranting about how old I am. It was kind of supposed to be a lead into what my first game was going to be, which was Silent Hill 2. I've never played the first one. Well, that's not true. I did play a little bit of it, but I didn't own it, and I couldn't play the whole game through. But 2 was fantastic. It had all my favorite elements in it, from the atmosphere to the horror to the isolation, desolation, all that stuff. Like, oh my God, there's no way I can make it out of this, and that made it spectacular, and I loved it. However, I haven't played it in forever, and I don't believe that it would stand up to the test of time, as it were. Can this still spook me? And that's one of the qualifications for this list, is whether or not the game would still spook me. And while number 1 is Silent Hill 2, that's why it's number 5, sorry. Number 5 is Silent Hill 2, by the way, 5-1. Dang it, I am sucking at this today. Number 5, Silent Hill 2. There we go. And we're doing it in descending order, 5-1, 1 being the best, 5 being the not as good as the best. While I still find Silent Hill 2 to be spectacular, I haven't played it in a while, that's why it's not higher on the list. Number 4, Alien Isolation. I'm getting on track now, I'm getting back to the format. Spectacular game. I loved it. It was all the things I look for in a game. Had the difficulty curve, had the unforgiving nature, had the horror elements from the oh my God, I'm going to die, to the panic-inducing run for your life, to the psychological is it around the next corner thing. And I loved it. However, the reason this one doesn't make it higher on the list is because of the fact that it was a bit more frustrating in some parts, and because of the frustration, it kind of sapped the horror aspect of it. Yes, I know, I loved it because it was hard, but it also made it difficult to actually get immersed in the atmosphere if I was continually dying. Still a spectacular game though. Number 3, Dead Island. Now, I know, there were a lot of flaws with this game, at least according to some people. I found this game to be quite spectacular, and the horror atmosphere in it was superb. I could not go into the city part without feeling a sense of dread and panic. Even in this day, even now, when I play that game, I get a little apprehensive when I go into the city area. That's chapter 2 for those of you who have never played the game. Everything after chapter 2, though, it stops being really horror. I mean, it stops being very like scary. I lose all apprehension. I lose all panic. I lose all dread. and it just becomes just the rest of the game. Mostly, I think it's because I became like super powerful in that game, and that's why it stopped being as scary. So I loved it, and the horror aspect was there, and the isolation, desolation. The isolation, not so much, because you still had communities to go to and stock up on stuff. But, like, it was a bit unforgiving. If you fail, you mess up, you're gonna die. Number 2, Outlast. Now, I like the series. Outlast 1, Whistleblower. Number 2, I like the first one best of all. Mostly, I think, because it was new. It was something I hadn't really done before. I'm not a big fan of the adventure games, the walking simulators. I don't hate them, but I don't really see them as true traditional games because the gameplay is basically walk to point. And yeah, Outlast had a good element to it where you could actually die, you could actually fail. Now, Outlast beats out Layers of Fear because Layers of Fear, while good in the atmosphere, was more heavy on the just follow the rails, as it were. I loved Layers of Fear for the horror aspect and the story, but as far as a game was concerned, it didn't really cut the mustard for me because you couldn't fail. Not too easily, anyway. Outlast, however, if you mess up in one of the stealth parts and get caught, you could die. If you mess up in, like, friggin' Chris Walker there, that dude with big old missing lips. Spectacular game. And it still had enough gameplay to keep it in the game category. So even though it was adventure and walking simulator with very little interaction from the player, it still had enough gameplay aspects, i.e. you needed a key, you needed to not get killed or caught, you needed to sneak around, and you had to plan out things, and that made it an enjoyable game, and that's why it's number 2 on my list. Now, number 1. I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with me on this. I know this was kind of a polarizing game, which is kind of weird because to me, I'm on the positive pole of this game because this game was and is probably topping my favorites list in a lot of cases. Number 1, The Last of Us. I know, calm down. I know there's people out there who hated The Last of Us. And you know what? I appreciate your opinion. You're allowed to have it. But to me, it was the best, especially in terms of horror. If you look at the game from the aspect that silence phone. If you look at the game from the aspect of me and my opinion on what horror ought to be, it met every single criteria. Number 1 was you were isolated. You were alone. You were separated from basically everybody. There were instances when you met up with other people, and more often than not, when you met up with other people, you were going to have to shoot people. There was hopelessness to it. You know, you're in an apocalyptic world where you could die at any moment, and there was very little people who cared about you, who would help you, and basically everything was just hopeless. It's game over, man, and you're working towards just surviving. Not even living, not thriving, surviving is all you're worried about. It had the monster aspect to it, but it also included what I included as my top for my last list. The worst enemy in a horror game was the humans, and this one played it up. I mean, we had the raiders, we had the basic the soldiers from the first city, you have the raiders, and then that one part with Ellie in the snow. That one man really cements who the true bad guys, who the true evil in this world is. And humans, man, humans. The world's over, everybody's dying, and humanity rises to show you just how poopy they can be. Apart from that, we had no happy ending. We had no conclusive ending. We had basically, you're still moving on in this horrible world, and you still got to survive, and there's no hero to this story. I mean, one could argue that the Fireflies were heroes, even though more often than not, they were just doing what all the other humans were doing. trying to survive and, you know, shooting other people at the same time. And you know what? That's exactly what I want to see in a horror game. Now, this game tops a lot of my favorites lists for a lot of reasons. And it tops my horror game list because it will always, it meets every single criteria, including unnerving me, including keeping me nervous and paranoid and everything else. If you play it on easy mode, it's not a horror game. It's basically just another action adventure shooter game. They included the grounded mode, which was boom, spectacular, as I always say. Anyway, that's enough rambling for me for today. Hope you like this video. I know I probably didn't include a lot of people's favorites games in this list. Like, I didn't have Resident Evil 7. I didn't put Outlast 2 in there because, well, one, I haven't beaten it, and two, I think they strayed away from psychological and went straight to ick factor. And ick factor can be unnerving and disorienting and whatnot, but it's not really scary to me. But apart from that, you know, if you have a favorite horror game, I wouldn't mind hearing about it in the comments down below. What's your favorite horror game? Go ahead and comment down below, and I'll be like, sweet dude, that was a pretty good game, or I never played that one. Was it good? Which actually happens a lot more often than I like to say. And yeah, I'm playing horror games right now, like Little Nightmares. It's a bit unnerving, but I don't really count it too much as horror. I mean, it does have the aspects to it, the isolation, desolation, all that fun stuff. And Dead Light is more just solve the puzzles and survive type of deal. And I love it. I love the game, don't get me wrong. Doom isn't even a horror game. It's just a shooter, and that's fun. But if you do have a favorite horror game, I'd like to hear about it. I said that already. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please go and poke the like button for me. If you'd like to, you can comment down below. Like I said, your favorite horror games. And don't forget to, what's all the stuff? You know, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And yeah, tune in next time when I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to finish up Halloween Spooktober for with words. And until then, night.